Welcome to the Seriously podcast. I'm your host, Annaliese. Now let's get into it. Welcome to the Seriously podcast, where we make light of serious conversations with really interesting people. Welcome back to the Seriously podcast. I'm your host, Annaliese, and I am so excited to announce Seriously podcast is 1. It's our first birthday, and I am so proud of all the content we've produced in the past year. All the people who've come on, I'm just so forever grateful to them because, when I started the pod, I honestly didn't know what way it was going to go, if it would even last a year, to be honest, because it's a big feat making a podcast. So, it's been an incredible year. There's been some amazing guests. And I just want to say a big thank you for listening in. And I'm just so grateful. So happy first birthday to the Seriously fam. So grateful. It's been an amazing first year in the podcasting world, and I can't wait to create more content. So yeah, thanks guys. That's just all I wanted to say was happy birthday to all of us, because I feel like we're like this little community now. Yeah, that's it. Love yous. Have a good day. Victoria Martelli is the founder and director of Kind Hearted Australia, the charity. I am so excited to have Vic on the show today because I'm actually an ambassador for Kind Hearted. I have taken on that role this year and I'm super passionate about the cause. Kind Hearted Australia raises money for women and kids fleeing domestic violence. And at the moment, their goal is to raise money to build safe transitional housing for these women and children. I'm so excited for this conversation today. It needs to be had, and there needs to be more funds towards such an important cause, especially in Australia. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I hope you like the chat. Welcome back to the Seriously podcast. I'm your host, Annaliese, and this week we have Victoria Martelli.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. We clicked because you found and direct the Kind Hearted Australia charity.
Yes.
Amazing. Congratulations. And we got you in to talk about it today because I can't really put into words what you guys do better than you can yourself. So I thought I'd get you in. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Victoria, it is an epidemic at the moment, domestic violence in Australia. It's got out of hand, it's rife. Can I ask you, off the top of your head, some stats that you might have as to how bad the epidemic has become?
Yeah. So basically, the police are being called to a domestic violence incident every 4 minutes in this country. One of our director's husbands is a police officer, and him alone, we're talking one cop, one night, he goes to at least 4 or 5, and that's just in his area. There's also been times, going back even to last year, and Georgia Lyle, who was the mother of then 5-year-old little boy, separated. Her ex had gone to her place north of the river, killed her, then went to his place south of the river, killed himself and set fire to the property, so left the little boy, 5 years old, with no one. That same weekend, the director's husband went to a incident where the woman was dead on arrival, but never got any coverage. So because it's one of those things of, we can't talk about it too much. We can't put this on the news. We can't have the media. I don't even know why. It's just such a taboo subject. And yet, as you say, it's an epidemic. It's out of control. If you speak to any of the police, they know that there needs to be more done. They can only do so much. They can only respond to so many incidents and deal with things given the amount that they have got and the resources they've got and the officers they've got available. So it is, it's pretty horrifying when you think about that. The amount of women that present at the hospitals, majority of those are from domestic violence situations.
Really?
And that's the ones that go.
A lot don't go. I never went.
No. And a lot don't report it either.
No.
So even the numbers that we're seeing, and I mean, at the moment we're up to 54 women who have been killed via a domestic violence related issue in Australia since the 1st of January.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in. In terms of, like, why do you think these numbers have increased, like, over the past few years? Like, why is it getting to this crux point where it's like the government needs to step in and say, hey, like,
Yep.
they need to change some sort of policy? Why do you think it's increased so much?
I think look, obviously COVID didn't help when everyone, and look, I mean, WA was, even though we've got the highest DV numbers in the country, we were not in lockdown for that particular length of time. We were obviously not allowed to travel around the country, but it definitely did get out of control during COVID because there was a lot of people stuck together, especially over in the eastern states. Just the mental health side of things deteriorated where people couldn't get out. They couldn't go and talk to friends. They couldn't go and see anybody. If you're in that kind of situation, of course, it's going to get really nasty. And we did see a major increase during that time. I think also, though, and this is one thing that we're looking at potentially delving into in coming time, the amount of bullying in schools and the correlation between that and domestic violence. This is personal for me. I've had to pull my son out of high school and homeschool him because he's been subjected to 18 months of not just verbal but physical abuse at his high school. And the perpetrators get no consequences. So if they're having that at between the ages of 11 to 13, what are they going to be doing when they get to 15, 16, 18, 20, and they're doing it to a boy in school, not having any consequences? How does that correlate to what they're going to do to a woman? I look at it and I think there's been so many changes within the education system over probably the last 10, 15 years that, teachers are limited to what they can say, what they can do. Parents even, like you have kids say to you now, you can't hit me. You're not allowed to smack me. Like we've almost gone too far in the opposite direction. That there's a fine line between what is working and what is not punished, but just correcting bad behaviour and really allowing people to get away with murder. Like literally.
What is the current sentencing for manslaughter?
Oh, I do not know.
For like domestic violence related offences?
It depends on whether they get charged with manslaughter or murder, because that one that was dead on arrival, he only got charged with grievous bodily harm occasioning death because he didn't mean it.
He didn't mean it?
He didn't mean it. So unless you mean to kill somebody, it's not premeditated.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
So that's the issue in the system then?
Yep.
So the relational aspect, like if you're married, or does the law in some way see it as they're having a domestic, like, the old age saying of like they're having a domestic, but really it's not okay?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think this probably occurs more in, unfortunately, the Indigenous areas. And WA, we're the largest state. We do have a large Indigenous population and we do have the highest DV numbers. But I also look at that and think there's a lot of times and you hear it, on the news, in just general chit chat, even in the movies. Oh, yeah, it's them again. Like they've already had calls about this particular family or this particular couple, whether it's from them themselves, neighbours, whoever. But because it's an ongoing thing, it's almost like, oh, too hard. And it gets swept under the carpet even more. And even within our own, like not domestic, but suburban areas.
Oh, yeah.
One of our ambassadors told me that in her instance, she had called the police. This is after she got out of the house, but her son was still inside. They came. They literally drove into the driveway and turned around and took off again because another emergency had come up.
So they don't actually rank it as very high priority?
Well, they certainly haven't been.
So until someone dies?
Well, exactly. And again, I look at it and I think it's not it's not because the police don't want to do something. It's because they just don't have the resources to do it.
Or it's out of control.
It's out of control.
Do you also think, because I see it from another perspective as well, not saying that this is okay at all either, I'm just having, some ideas. I heard the other day that we have created a society in 2023, 2024 of, powerful women and women coming into positions of power, yet we haven't educated men on how to handle that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing, because men are almost like so out of their masculinity that they feel out of control, like they don't really know where they stand anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think that plays a part in it, like how society has changed so much?
Yeah, I think it has. And you're right. Like education is the absolute key to all of this, from being able to, have equality, that women are just as capable and rightfully able to continue in areas that they wish to pursue as a man is. And instead of trying to segregate males and females from basically the day they're born, there needs to be that education that we're all human beings, we all deserve to live peacefully, we all deserve to have kindness, and we also all deserve to be treated with respect. And if you're in a relationship with someone, everyone is within their legal human right to be treated well. And this is something that we also are looking at in terms of the kids, because bullying, we just think that's such an important starting point. Mental health has declined so much in the country, especially in our children. And you have to think that these kids are seeing it somewhere. So if it's not coming from their parents, they're either being exposed to it somewhere else, older sibling potentially, what they're being allowed to watch. Maybe the parents aren't in a domestic violence situation themselves, but maybe they're not there to see what their kids are actually accessing. And if you look at that going the full circle, I just think that's one area that has definitely changed. Social media, the access that kids have got, it's not setting them up for a potentially positive future. And one of the other statistics, especially over in the East, when the rugby is on the finals, DV goes up 50%.
50%?
50%. Because they get so emotional and charged up, and they're watching a game. But, God forbid their team doesn't win, it's their partner that gets it taken out on.
In terms of a domestic violence relationship, if someone's listening to this right now and thinking, my relationship's great, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, what constitutes a DV relationship? Like, what are some of the hallmarks of being in one that you wouldn't know? Do you know what I mean? Like, because it's not often that you wake up and go, oh, I'm in a DV relationship. Awesome. No. Like, you realise after sometimes, or like when you have to leave. So for someone listening, like, what are the signs?
I think the first thing to remember is that it does not have to be physical. It does not have to be, they can never lay a hand on you and it's still considered domestic violence. So if somebody is very controlling of what you wear or how you portray yourself when you're out, not wanting you to catch up with your friends or stopping you from doing the things that you enjoy doing, whether it be dancing or whatever, going to the gym, they are all red flags. They are 100% red flags, primarily of coercive control. And we've already seen, New South Wales has brought in law against coercive control. Queensland's passed it. It hasn't come into effect yet, but it's next to happen. And obviously, if somebody hits another person and they're in a relationship, it's that first moment. And there's always, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. It was an accident. I was this, I was that. But it's that first moment that you really need to take stock and go, where's this leading? What's going to happen next? And God forbid it happens a second time. That's usually the real indicator that this isn't going to change, and things are just going to continue to get worse.
And it always does happen a second time because it escalates.
Absolutely.
And I think realising the first time they've crossed that boundary, like psychologically, they're most likely going to do that again.
Yep.
Like, because they've learned that's okay because you've accepted
Exactly.
that.
Exactly.
Behaviour.
And that's the thing. And, it also comes down to, like, going back to coercive control kind of area, it comes down to your friends and family as well. Because when you're in a relationship, sometimes you do have blinkers on and you can't see what's actually, right in front of you. But your family and friends usually see those signs before you do, and it's really important for them to know that they have to say something. They have to, any form of domestic violence needs to be picked up and brought to everyone's attention before it can escalate. And before anyone thinks it is okay that, well, I can say this and I can treat her like that, or I can do whatever. If you're at a dinner party and you see a guy grab his wife or his girlfriend, she wants to do something or she's saying something and he grabs her, that is, again, another red flag. Pull them up on it. Don't just let it go. And, if you're talking to your mates, she looks this, she did that, whatever. If you don't think that it's right what they're saying, call them out on it. Because that, again, brings people back to have accountability for what they're doing, but also what they're allowing to happen.
So there's emotional abuse, coercive control, physical abuse. What about financial abuse? Because this is a big one that I've heard a lot about because, a lot of my friends are mums at home, and sometimes when I have conversations, I think, oh, wow, like, some of the money or like some of the ways that the finances are handled seem very contrived.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, what constitutes financial abuse for people listening?
Basically, if you're in a relationship or a marriage and you are being controlled of how much you are allowed to spend or how much you're given, it's financial abuse. If you're in a relationship, and obviously everyone's situation is different, but majority of people will either have a joint account and there's no limitations on, within reason, what you can and can't spend. Or if you've got your own accounts, there shouldn't be an issue in terms of that. When you are either told or it comes about that you have no individual control over your life and finances are a huge part of that, that's when you need to start considering what's happening here. Because, again, it's that whole mindset of, right, well, if I make her or him relying on me for everything, then they can't leave me.
And a control freak loves that.
Absolutely. Because they know that they can't just leave. They can't, potentially go and talk to somebody. They can't do anything without the controlling party being the one making the decisions and calling the shots.
That's another point that I want to bring up. How important is it for women to have their own finances? Like, because I think money is power and it enables opportunities. It enables you to leave if you need to. It enables you to have a roof over your head. And unfortunately, in this day and age, you do need like 2 incomes most of the time. How important is it for women to, even have a little bit of money set aside? Like,
I just think, I've grown up in a very, my family, my mum, my grandmother, we were very strong, independent women.
yes.
And although my mum went through the situation she did and I did as well, it never allowed me to have that side of things controlled. So even now, I've been married for nearly 20 years. We still have separate bank accounts individually, but then we've got our joint ones as well. And we run, multiple businesses. So there's all of that. But I just think it does give a person, whether it's male or female, that idea of the individual self and to know that you do have your own account that you can go and do your own thing, you're not reliant on another person. And I don't think any human being needs to be. We're all an individual, and if we weren't, we'd just be a clone of each other. So I think it's very, very important, and especially, like, you don't want to ever put things into the general norm of, well, this is, how things are. But given the way that things are at the moment, especially in Australia, with domestic violence, I think it's just one of those things that every person should definitely have their own financial accounts.
I agree. I've always had my own. My mum always has had her own.
Yep.
I was raised that way. My grandma was like that. So I think it's good when you have role models, but some women don't, and that's fine. But just learning to have that agency and autonomy to be like, cool, I've got this aside if I do need to leave.
Yep.
It gives you opportunity. Wow, we've had a really good chat today. There's been so much that I wanted to ask you. In terms of leaving a DV relationship, it is the most dangerous time for a woman when she has to leave.
Yep.
How, if someone is listening to this and thinking, oh my God, all of these red flags are in my relationship, I haven't had the confidence to leave it, now I'm thinking, okay, I want to make an escape plan.
Yep.
What are the steps for women to make an escape plan if they want to leave?
100%. The decision time and the leaving time are absolutely the most dangerous times. If somebody's going to do something, it will be then. And obviously that becomes even more difficult for especially a woman if she's got kids. The biggest things to try and do is not alert the perpetrator to what you're planning. Really confiding in either your family or best friends or people that you trust 100% who you can talk to and you can make a plan with. It's really difficult to do on your own. And trying to just take those little steps of, yes, putting some money aside. If you don't have a bank account, I know Commonwealth Bank especially if you go into any of those branches, explain your situation, they will open an account. I think they also actually give money as well.
Oh, wow.
To assist with that exact process. But it's also being able to, if you're going to visit your mum or you're going to visit your best friend, take some things each time. Just take a few clothes, take some of your kids' toys. So that way when you do have to leave, you don't have time to pack up your house.
No.
You literally are walking out the door with what you're wearing, what your kids are wearing, and maybe what will fit in a backpack. That's it. So if you can take the time and plan it without giving any signals away that that's what you're doing, it will mean that the time that you actually leave will be a lot less difficult, and the chance of any issues coming about from the perpetrator will be a lot less.
And I have to bring this up because a lot of people say it and it annoys me. The old age saying of, why doesn't she just leave?
Yep.
First of all, why do people say that? And why don't women just leave? I guess, I know why. But, for people listening who are really uneducated, what's the answer?
There are so many factors that go into domestic violence and how a person is in that situation. One, they may really love each other. Despite the physical violence, the underlying reasons that they came together in the first place usually are out of love. And to acknowledge that the person that you have committed to or you love and you want to spend your life with is that way is really bloody hard. Secondly, a lot of the time, women especially, do not tell anybody what is happening. They are shamed by it, they are embarrassed by it, and there is such a culture of not believing that that is what's actually happening. It really comes down to having the faith to be able to do that, but that can be really hard and traumatic in itself if you come from a family that's got a very long tradition of no, you don't get divorced no matter what, or you don't leave the person. They're the father, they're the mother, whatever the case may be. So there's so many reasonings behind that. It comes down to financial availability. As we were just saying, if you don't have a bank account, what are you going to do?
Literally. Homeless.
How are you gonna go?
Yeah.
The other problem that we've got at the moment is the refuges, because it's so insanely out of control. All the refuges, the emergency shelters are full. They can't take anybody.
Oh my God.
So we've got a cycle now of women and their kids trying to get into an emergency shelter, being turned away, not because they don't want to take them, because they physically can't fit them in, and then that person having to make the choice of whether they live on the street or stay out overnight or go back to where they've come from. And if you've got kids, it's what's the lesser of two evils? Do you want to put your child out in
a car?
In a car,
Yeah.
out on the street, or do you take them back to potentially either witness or be involved themselves in domestic violence?
Yeah, and all their things are there, the comforts, the
Absolutely.
food, everything.
Yeah. So when it comes back to why didn't she just leave, or why didn't they just leave, people need to realise that it's not just that easy, not to mention there's always the threats. And we already know that when you do leave, or in those planning times, it's the most vulnerable that something will happen, that the perpetrator will do something. There's also the threats. If you ever leave me, I'm going to do this. Not just to the person, there's usually threats to their family, animals, all the rest of it. So it's not an easy situation. And for people to say that, that's where we are in this cycle right now, and one of the reasons that we need to change it, because people need to be informed, people need to be educated, and people need to believe. They need to believe that this is happening, and far more than what is shown or mentioned anywhere.
Now, Kind-Hearted at the moment are raising money for a very exciting project. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So we have the Kokoraninya initiative. Kokoraninya is a Noongar word which means beautiful in the context of to make oneself. And one of our directors chose that because basically we look at it, and that's exactly what these women and their kids are trying to do. They're making themselves beautiful in the process of having come from something not very beautiful. So Kokoraninya plans to be multiple communities of tiny homes. These will be specifically long-term transitional homes for women and their children escaping domestic violence, and to take the pressure off of the emergency shelters. Some of the shelters have had women in there for over 12 months, and they only get funding for 6 to 8 weeks. And when you've got shelters that can only take maybe 5 families at a time, again, as I said, there's such a blockage at the moment of women being able to get into those shelters, but there's also a blockage of them getting out because there's nowhere to go. Rental market's out of control. There's not a lot of dedicated, pure housing just for women escaping DV. And a lot of the shelters as well, not all of them take boys. So if you've got a little boy, some don't take them at all. Yeah, some don't take them at all. Some take them to the age of 12. Some take them to the age of 16.
What?
Yeah. So
that's
again,
an issue.
It's another reason. Oh, I'm not going to leave because I've got a little boy.
That is, what if you have 3 boys?
Well, exactly.
Wow.
So
that's horrible.
It's that needs to obviously be looked at, but there also needs to be more housing available for these families that really just want to get away and rebuild their lives. And that's what we want Kokoraninya to be. We want to have, wraparound services that will be provided by some external organisations, counselling, mental health support, medical advice, basically everything, support with parenting, support with education, and the kids as well. Like, they have gone through incredibly traumatic circumstances, whether they've experienced physically or just seen it. From a mental health point of view, these kids, we're trying to break the cycle. We're trying to, because we know that most kids that have been brought up in a DV relationship will go on to either be perpetrators or victims themselves. And that's where we need to break the cycle. We want that to end, and we want them to feel safe. We want the women to feel safe. And there's so many aspects of Kokoraninya that we really want to focus in on. The one thing for me, when I listened to Hannah's story, the story of Hannah Clark and her 3 beautiful children that were murdered over in Brisbane 4 years ago. Her car was in the driveway. It wasn't in a garage. So she got the kids into the car, and then her ex came out, jumped into the car. And I just look at that and, like, I think you need a garage. Like, they're the types of things that I take into consideration when we've come up with the concepts for this.
Right.
Each one needs to have panic buttons. They need to have garages. They need to have everything that you possibly can put in place to minimise the chance of anything happening. Nothing is ever going to be foolproof. If someone wants to do something, they will. But God, make it as hard for them as possible.
Yeah.
But we are excited.
That is amazing, though. I love what you're doing. You're an amazing individual. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find you online?
So
if they want to donate?
Yeah, they can head to the Kind Hearted website, so kindhearted.org.au. We are on social media as well, Instagram and Facebook at Kind Hearted AUS. And yeah, look, just keep an eye out for all the events and fundraising that we have coming up, and hopefully we'll be bashing down some doors, government and local government wise, to get some things happening.
Yeah, it's so needed, and you're doing an amazing job. So congratulations, and let's raise some money.
I know, and let's stop domestic violence.
Let's stop domestic violence. Thanks, Vic, for coming on.
Thanks so much, Annaliese.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in this week. It's been an amazing chat, and I'll catch you next week for another guest. Bye.